I'm here with Shon Joyner, and for those of you who don't know, he was in The Wheel, which was a really intense survival show where the people involved, participants, were made to go from one basically ecosystem to another, and with no preparation for, you didn't know where you're going, or so you couldn't study plants, and they'd really selected people, if I'm correct, that didn't have a big background in...
Right, not too much of a outdoors or survival background.
I think mostly, my channel is about mental resilience.
Mm-hmm.
So my big starting question, and the big question for this whole video is, you faced a lot of things in this and in other areas of your life prior to that that required a large amount of mental resilience, where usually in life we can look ahead and we say, okay, this is how I want everything to look, and we plan it all out, and then if things go off course, it's really easy to get upset, to get down, to just fall apart. Where did you get your mental resilience? What do you do to bring yourself through tough stuff? What's there?
I'm glad that you mentioned about what it is to be resilient. Before I actually took part on the show, there was a card that I carried with me, and we're allowed to take a few pictures of our family members or friends. So myself, I mostly just had I had a note card, and then I cut up these 4 pictures and put them on one side, and then on the other side of the card I wrote faith on the top, and then I put a line, and then below it I put resilient, because just over time, I'm not a big guy, I'm 5'3", so I feel like, and it's not just me, it's probably yourself or anybody who watches this, there's times where you feel like a David in life, and life is the Goliath, and you just have to be resilient through those certain tough times of your life. And a lot of my friends will just say, man, you're a little tank, man, you just keep trucking. So I wrote that on there, and when things got really hard for me out there, when I had thoughts of possibly quitting or just pushing the button to tap out, I would look at my card and like, all right, I got faith. When I say faith, it's whatever your meaning of faith is. Sometimes I would look for guidance from the universe, or whether you believe in Lord or Jehovah or whatever it is, or just faith in yourself. And then the resilient part, it was like, okay, I'm resilient, I'm tough. If I'm not tough, I wouldn't be here still at this moment. So am I going to be tough another hour, another half a day, another week? So when I would look at that, that would instantly snap me. When I would start having negative thoughts, I knew that was written down. I wrote that down on that card for a reason. So that helped me a lot of, like you said, through the military. I did 6 years in the Marines, and I grew up in a not so good neighborhood. So yeah, it was instilled in me at a young age, and I'm doing my best to carry it along with me as I get older.
Not all of us are going to be in the military, not all of us are going to be on a show, but it's pretty much guaranteed that all of us at one point in life or another, we're going to hit something that's going to require that high level of resilience, whether it's just somebody else really close to us dying, or getting that word that we have cancer, whatever it's going to be. Mm-hmm. Any words for people that haven't hit something like that yet, to give them strength or to give them resilience for that time, for that moment when they really need it?
Most definitely. I was telling 2 of his forest monks that he has at ReWild University, is that there's a difference between quitting and moving on. And I think so much in today's life, people, they say, oh, well, don't quit, you quit, you're a loser. You may be stuck in a bad job or something that you hate, but then you may have a family and you go, oh, I don't want to quit, or whatever it may be. You'll find a way to know that whether you're quitting or you're moving on is putting yourself in a better situation to possibly, in your eyes, have better success, or not constantly waking up and saying, why am I going into a place so negative again, day after day after day. So it's up to you, whatever you're going through in life, to figure out whether you're quitting or moving on in whatever situation it may be. But my big thing of what I can tell anybody who hasn't yet felt like they've had a certain roadblock in their way, if for whatever reason you haven't had any type of roadblock in your life, I think you're pampering yourself or you're not getting out of your comfort zone. I feel like life is made for us to have challenges and put ourselves through things. Because from when I went to the military, everybody told me, do not join the Marines, whatever you do. It's hard, it's difficult, you're going to get hazed. And I said, oh, that sounds like a challenge. And I went and did it, and then right away I was like, oh, why did I do this? It's too late. I already accepted the challenge. And then, same thing on the show. When I got on the show, I read what it entailed, and I said, I don't think I want to do this. And one of my friends, he lost an arm and a leg in combat, and I talked to him, and he goes, looking at what Adam had went through, he's like, man, I'm missing an arm and a leg. He was like, you don't know what I would do to love to have a chance to do something like that. He goes, man, you're still young, man. You have all your limbs. He goes, worst case scenario, if it gets tough, then just tap out. He goes, I won't think of you any different. Just try to tackle the challenge. I think you could do it. So when somebody tells you stuff like that, man, and you realize you got both your limbs and you're still able to move around, and so far, man, I myself and 5 other people are the only people in the world to ever do something like that. So that enough, and there is a prize, and this was all for no cash prize. It was just to see if we were as tough as we thought we were to take on this challenge.
Wow. So that's, I'm really glad you brought that up to the Forest Monks, and then brought it up here too, because there can be so much fear of failure sometimes that then we never take that first step forward because we're afraid of what people are going to think of us if we fail, or we're afraid of what we're going to think of ourselves if we fail.
Yeah.
But to give yourself permission to fail and say, it's okay, then you can move forward with things and you can try.
Oh, yeah.
And then you grow a little bit stronger, each time you try something. And I know a lot of people watch these programs and love them. And it's really easy for those of us, back on the couch to criticize what goes on, what somebody's doing. But I think we also all realize that we're seeing maybe 1% of what you're actually experiencing there. Are there, I don't know how much you can say about behind the scenes, but can you share a couple of experiences that you had behind the scenes that maybe weren't shown? That
Yeah. The biggest thing since speaking of failure, is that it's different. I feel like a lot of failures that I've had in life, only myself and maybe some close people knew about them, or my fire team or squad that I was in Iraq with. When you have a failure that only you know about, or people close to you know about, to me it's not that bad. But when could possibly fail in front of millions of people, to me, I think that's very scary. You grab 6 people and say, hey, this is either pass or fail, and you're going to do it in front of millions of people in 50 different countries. I don't know, it bothered me a lot. It really started to sink in, because I know whenever it was done and I was going to go back home, it was either I felt like I was either going to be considered a winner or a loser, because sometimes I can tend to be hard on myself, and nobody wants to be a loser in front of millions of people, or however many, 30, 40, 50 different countries, whether you see those people or not. But as far as behind the scenes, they didn't capture a lot of night stuff. And I felt like night was, when the sun went down, I felt it was very difficult for me. A lot of times I had a lot of mental turmoil going on in my head. When the sun's out, you can see everything, you can move around. I feel like you can get clarity. But when you're in the unknown territory, one of the first places I went was the Gran Chaco Bush Plains in northern Argentina. It gets anywhere from like 100, 120 degrees. And, the sun goes down and you hear all these nocturnal animals come out. It doesn't sound like anywhere where I was raised in Indiana. And, I built this little ghetto-looking tarp thing. It wasn't the best, but I was just so low on energy, it was enough to get me through. So I just find myself sometimes I could never get a good night's sleep because I was always on edge of stuff that I was hearing. And I felt just very mentally weak and like vulnerable and unsafe, not knowing what was around the corner, if it was a jaguar or a bear or an ocelot or whatever it may be. And a lot of times I go, you know what, man, I think I'm just done. I think I'm just going to quit. And then I go, well, it's real dark. I don't want to go hike all the way back to wherever the safety zone's at. So let me just tough it out and let me just wait till the morning. Then the morning would come up and I'd feel somewhat better again. And that stuff was never captured of how difficult it was for me to just get through the evenings. Not just at that location, but every location that I made it to. So... and then just walking out in the open to go, use the restroom and always looking over your back to see if it's a big cat or something or just making noises. I think I'm a pretty tough person, but when you give yourself up to the land and you're no longer the top predator on the food chain because you don't have your gun or your bow with you, all you have is a knife and a stick, and you don't have a flashlight to look around, man, you start finding out a lot about yourself. At least I did. I want to share, I want to, and what brought me and Kenton together is that I watched his videos before, I want to say maybe 3 months before I even got this challenge, and of when he fell through the ice, and how he was able to stay focused and keep his composure and hike, miles off into the woods and be able to create a fire with the hand drill method while he's shaking and snapping spindles, and to going through failures of not getting a fire started, but then eventually to stay focused enough to get a fire created. I felt like out of any of the YouTube videos I watching his mental composure is what carried me to get through the stages that I did. I got very sick on day 2 when I was in the bush plains. There's not much that the producers or camera crew were allowed to say to me or warn me about what to eat and what not to eat. And I'll tell you, when you're hungry and you find something that you think's edible, even though the rule of method is you don't know what it is, don't eat it. It sounds easy until you're really hungry and you're really looking for food and you can't catch any fish. So it was something I found, and it was a bean, and I've never heard of any poisonous bean, so I was able to boil up some water and put them in there, and I started eating them. And they were castor beans. You make castor oil with them, and they're very poisonous and contain ricin. And if you eat enough of them, or supposedly one, I'm guessing, well, for one, somebody was looking over me from up above, I feel like. I tell you, I became real religious out there very quick. I don't know if you're not, that's fine, but when you go through something, you're going to start reaching for something that's out of your willpower to keep you going on. But I got very sick. I couldn't even hold down water, just constantly throwing up. And I'm so glad they didn't capture this stuff. But I've never had constant vomiting and diarrhea at the same time while being dehydrated, to where I couldn't even consume anything because it was going to go right through me again. And at that moment, I was 90% sure I was gonna quit. And they edited pretty good to make it look like I was fine the next day, but I went through 2 days of that. And I think watching his videos gave me the mental capability and to also focus myself on being resilient again. That got me through that, because I don't really know what else could have got me through that moment. That was those first 3 days was my hardest time on the show, hands down, easily. And when I got to day 4, I go, if I don't have this experience again, I'm not tapping out. Nothing's gonna make me tap out, and I never did. So.
Yeah, for those that don't know, those castor beans are considered one of the most toxic plants in the world. I mean, that's amazing that you're
I don't know,
still here.
Yeah.
Jeez. Is there anything else you want to share?
Yeah, I can give a quick rundown on what the whole show sort of encompassed, and sort of the realities of what it's like surviving. But the purpose of the show is that there's 6 people, there's 6 ecosystems. The bush plains, Patagonia, very cold, also the mountains, the tundra. Then there's the island, which is in Chile. And then there's the Amazon and the wetlands. I was terrified of... I didn't know where I was going. When I found out I was in South America, I knew Amazon was hands down going to be one of the locations. And I knew that further down, when you get down, there was a place that's cold. Because obviously, the further down you go south, it's going to get colder. Patagonia is as close as you can get without being on Antarctica.
It's Antarctica, basically. Yeah.
So it's cold. So my 2 biggest fears were either getting put in the Amazon right away. I just said, whatever it is, I don't want to get put in the Amazon right away. Because of what I've seen on channels like that place, there's a lot of food, but there's a lot of predators because there's so much food. And then I didn't want to get put in a cold environment. So pretty much you do whatever you can to make it to the next location. There's no food given in between transports, so I would either, so for instance, I don't know how, but I made it out the bush plains. It was 7 days. You never know when it's going to happen. I found out later that it was the lunar cycle of the moon, which causes a switch. So it's very depressing because you don't know when you're getting moved. So sometimes you start getting comfortable with the terrain and you're like, okay. It took me 6 days until I started catching fish. And once I figured out the spot and I go, oh my gosh, awesome. Tomorrow I know how to start catching more fish now. I got the hang of it. Nope. Bam. The cycle of the moon changed. And I was so mad because I had been going, all this time really without food. And just when I figured it out, the switch happened. So now in my mind I had something and I go, I think they're switching whenever I start to catch food, because I just didn't know. So next I went to Patagonia, the mountains, and so you get happy because I go, oh my gosh, I got that place, I conquered that place. And then you go, where am I going now? So now you don't know where you're going again. I get put in a private jet. They gave me 2 bottles of water. And it's mentally just depressing to you because you don't know where you're going. You're thinking, I just want to hurry up and get there because I could be, looking for food now. But I'm on this private jet. It's just me, 2 pilots, and a handler, and that's it. And I got to Patagonia. They dropped me off up on this mountaintop. There's snow everywhere. Definitely not my territory. And I go, oh man. All right, it was beautiful though. It was definitely beautiful, but it was scary because it was just white everywhere. I made it down, and I wasn't able to get a fire started. So once again, I just was very down on myself, and it was just wet, and it was snowing on me, and I felt like I wanted to give up again because the few things they were able to communicate with me, wasn't much talking. But before I started to go down the mountain, they go, Sean, all we want to let you know is that it's snowing. and you really need to get a fire started. It's going to be very cold, which I knew, and I couldn't get a fire started. So I did some classic mistakes of things you're not supposed to do that I knew. But you know, as a kid, when your parents tell you don't touch the stove or don't do that, you just want to find out for yourself. It's the same thing, I feel like, that goes into survival. I almost drank, you know, water that I didn't boil because I was just so thirsty and I couldn't get a fire started at times. So I slept that night just cold. I didn't have any bedding, and I was just cold. And I just said, Lord, the universe has helped me to make it into the next morning, and I did. And I was able to refocus myself. I was able to look around the terrain and start finding things that would create a fire. And I was struggling. I caught some fish my second day, just some small rainbow trout that they didn't show because they only pick and choose of what they want to show. I think I caught 3 rainbow trout, and they were small, but man, it felt like the world to me. And I went on, and then I want to say I got to day 14 or 15, and I found this dead, it's called a Patagonian Mara. They're huge. They're big hairs, and I couldn't believe how big this sucker was, but it was dead. It looked like a possible like cougar or mountain lion that got to it. And that's what the predator was in Patagonia. They call them pumas, but it's the same thing as a mountain lion. Bush plains, it was jaguars, caiman, and bears. So the back of this Patagonian Mara was scratched up, and I could see these like scratch marks on it. And I think it tried to get under and hide under this log or something, but I saw it and I just didn't think much of it. I go, I'm going to try to catch some fish today, and I had no success. And then all of a sudden, I just kept thinking about that Patagonian Mara, and I go, man, I'm not eating anything that's already dead. I don't know where it's been. And I just kept thinking, man. I was so hungry. So finally, something just said, just go back to it and go look and just see how bad a shape it's in. So I went and looked. The front end of it looked pretty good, but the back end of it was a little scratched up, and there was a few bugs on it. And I said, you know what? I've never cut open anything ever in my life. Everything I bought has been from the store.
Wow.
So there's a lot of first experiences on that show. So I went ahead, I put it on this stick that had a V shape, and I picked it up, and it was heavy. I carried it back to close to the river, and I just gathered whatever I watched from watching YouTube videos, and I skinned it, and I cut off the bad sections of it, and then I gutted it, and I started feeling like a man. I felt like I was doing some manly stuff. I felt like a man in the Marines, but we didn't do stuff like that. It's different. It's just urban warfare. Man, I started to feel like a man. I started feeling proud that I was accomplishing something. And man, that was pretty much my really only good meal on that show. And part of survival is just being a scavenger and coming across things. You know, there's a lot of these shows where they go, oh, you know, you're gonna all of a sudden this magical like hog or something appears or whatever, and I'm like, come on now, you know. But in reality, man, these animals, they're gonna see you before you see them. A big part of survival is just taking whatever you can find or you come across and using it to your advantage. And man, was I glad that I found that dead Patagonian Mara, and I just made this. Hey, I'm hungry. I'll deal with the situation later. But it was good, and I didn't get sick. And
Lots of meat, I bet.
yeah, and then of course, the day after that, the beacon goes off. So now I have in my head that whenever I find food on the show, that they're doing a switch. So I'm like, you know what? I wonder if they're like, since I'm thinking everybody else is doing great on the show, because I don't see these people. We're all at different locations, so we're all rotating. So I'm like, I'm probably just doing so horrible of a job that I'm catching food like later than everybody else, and they're switching it off me. So my last location was the tundra, and we had to ride through the terrain on horse, and I felt that I've already come through the worst, which was the bush plains and the mountains, and I felt that I already started becoming an animal. As far as my instincts, I could smell certain things, I could hear certain things different, and I felt like I was already at a transformation 15 days in. But I made it to the tundra, and I was able to find water pretty quick. It was just I was just so sore from being on a horse for an hour, and then going down this, this real rocky. It reminded me of the Grand Canyon, with just a little bit more foliage around, but wasn't much stuff there. And yeah, I didn't really catch anything. I didn't really have much success catching any fish. I got some good bites, but I wasn't able to hook anything. And I found this small little crayfish, and man, there was hardly any meat on that thing. But to me, it was a lobster. In my mind, I made it up like it was a lobster meal, and I was so hungry. And man, this is little claws on it, and I'm cracking the little claws and getting every little bit of meat that I can. And I remember, I felt like I had ate a lobster. I remember I laid back, and I was just so proud of myself that I found this little crayfish. And in my head, it was as big as a lobster, just because it's survival mode. Any little thing that I found out there helped. And I'd find dandelions, and I'd eat dandelions. But it got to the point where I had lost close to 30 pounds in a matter of 30 days, and the medics were really getting concerned about me. And I wasn't able to use a restroom in almost a month, and so I didn't want them to pull me off the show. They asked me what would it be to make me quit, and I told them I wouldn't. I would either finish the 60 days, or they would have to, or if I broke something, or if I got carried out. And so day 30, I felt nervous because they had warned me a few times that I needed to use a restroom and that my body wasn't in good shape. So I forced myself for like 20 minutes. Felt like I don't know what it's like to give birth, but for a man, I felt like I got pretty close to experience. I was able to use the restroom, and I was so exhausted. I was so tired. I remember I set up my camera. I did a lot of self-filming too. I had a camera crew around me, but I did a lot of the filming myself, and they offered no comfort. They just blended in with the territory to me. And I remember I got my camera, and I go, well, it looks like I'll be able to continue on. I use the restroom, and I go, I think I can make it another 7 days. And from that moment, I started hearing, because I have a microphone, a little small microphone, so even though the rest of the people are, miles away, they can hear it because I'm mic'd. I had to change my own batteries and stuff. So I felt like from that moment, like 10 minutes later, like in the distance, I hear a vehicle pull up, and I see these people coming down, and they told me to come over, and I knew whatever it was in good news. And the producer, he goes, he went to go talk to the medic, and then they came over, and I saw 3 of them walk over to me, and I knew it wasn't going to be good. Man, it almost, he bent down to me, and he said, he goes, Sean, he goes, we're sorry, man, but we can't let you continue. And you would think that I would be happy at that moment because I'm about to get all the food I've been dreaming about, but man, it brought me down to tears because I knew that even though my body was deteriorating, I knew that I had 7 days or a week more worth of fight in me to continue on. And I felt like they let me eat some poisonous stuff that could have killed me, so why not let me continue another 7 days? So it was a life. It was so, I don't know, it was a blessing, and I hated that I had to get pulled off the show like that, but I guess I'm happy that I didn't quit, and I really got to see what I was made of, to even put my body through that stage to start deteriorating. But I tell you what, everything was so real when it was over, man. Just seeing people once again, seeing children, certain things almost made me want to break down into tears. I remember the first time I heard a car it felt like those 30 days felt like 6 months to me. And I remember I was so mad that they pulled me, is that I didn't want to talk to any of the medics really. They would ask me questions how it felt when they were taking me back up to the facility, and I was so mad. I was upset at myself that I let my body get in that shape. And then I had talked a lot about ice cream. I missed ice cream so much.
Oh, man.
And Gustavo, he was one of the medics, and he tricked me. He goes, Sean, if you cooperate with us, he goes, we have some helado. Helado is ice cream in Argentina. And man, I was like a little kid. Right when he said that, I was like, all right. So I cooperated with them, and man, they had some ice cream with me, and man, that made everything better. From that moment, I forgot about all that other stuff. But I'm glad I'm here, and I've talked a lot. And I just want to thank Kenton, his monks, his family. I'm just happy to be here at this moment. A year from this day, it would be day 4 for me when I was out in the bush plains in Argentina. So this is like a special anniversary for me to come from Indianapolis, Indiana, and join Kenton up here in northern Wisconsin, and just let him know how much I appreciate that mental stability he gave me, and learn from him and his forest monks, and just the environment. So man,
it's been a joy to have you here.
I feel privileged, and I hope that the little bit that I was able to share with you guys from my show, and watching the stuff that Kenton has done, from living a night in the freezing cold, and falling in ice and crawling out and living, making it through the night through that. This guy really is the truth. I'm not trying to be a downer on some of these other people who call themselves survivalists who are famous, but Kenton is the real deal. He's not going back up in a warm place at night to look warm and then coming back and acting like he was really there. So he's the real deal. I spent a few days with him now, and this is just an honor. So thank you very much.
Thank you. One last thing.
Yeah.
A lot of people that watch this channel are some younger people that are just coming out of high school, or still in high school, and struggling to find their way in a world that lays things out for us really clearly, but usually if we follow that route, it's not the route in our heart. Any words of wisdom for those guys and girls?
I was telling 2 of the monks, they're 18 and 19, and when I was 19, I was enlisted in the United States Marine Corps Infantry, getting prepared to go over to Iraq, at the time, what I thought. And, you just never, if there's people that say, hey, I want to be a doctor, and they follow that path to being a doctor, like, I think that's awesome. But then there's a part of me that goes, that's sort of boring. Like, you have your path already laid out for you. But it's awesome that you are accomplishing it. So it's your perspective on what you look at it. And there's been times in my life where I go, I don't know what I want to do. Like, when I get out of the Marines, what am I going to do? And, never what I thought that I would be on a reality. So everybody, right now I'm training for American Ninja Warrior, but I thought there might have been a possibility that I would have been on that, but I never would have thought I would have been on a survival show. When I told all my friends I was going to be on a survival show, they thought I was insane because I have no knowledge of anything of outdoors. So I'm letting you guys know that, to say that sometimes it's okay to not know what your next step in life is going to be, but it's up to you to try to figure that out. And it's not going to happen overnight sometimes. Sometimes it'll take somebody like my friend Adam, who lost his arm and his leg, and to say, you know what, I think you really need to do that. I believe in you. I have faith in you. It takes somebody like Kenton, or to give more education to his monks, or it may take your parents, or it may take one of your friends that'll point you in a direction of where you feel like you want to go. But do not feel like you're obligated to go the path of everybody else, of going to high school, then going to college, and then you get in student debt, and then feeling like now you have to get in this pull of being an apprentice, or or doing whatever, what everybody else does. Do not feel like you have to get in that cookie cutter type of mode to live your life. It's okay to not know what your next step in life is. I think that's the beauty of life sometimes, is the unknown. And that's what the will was on the show, was the unknown of not knowing where I was going next and dealing with it.
Wow. Oh my gosh. Thank you for sharing all
No
of
problem,
that.
man.
Awesome. So amazing.
This guy's a legend. He doesn't like me. He doesn't like me saying that, but he's a legend. He knows what he's talking about. And I tried to share some stuff with him. I think he should tackle an opportunity on one of these big survival shows. And I just tried to give him some wisdom and letting him know that he could spread his word to millions of people instead of just a select audience on YouTube. So I don't know. We'll see if he does that or not. But I think he would totally kick butt at that.
Thank you again.
No problem, man. Thanks, my friend.